I have some very unfortunate and saddening news to report today. In my 25 years of fishing in Washington State, I've never seen anything as egregious as this. This photo is of excess fish from a Washington State salmon and steelhead hatchery, which were considered abundance, more than the hatchery could actually harvest. These fish have been dumped into a trench and buried on the hatchery grounds. When I first saw this photo, I didn't believe it was real, as everything online, in legislative law, and in policies and procedures deep rooted into this agency specifically go against anything of this nature ever being done. So I called the Department of Fish and Wildlife Hatchery Program Manager. What I was told should absolutely floor every angler in the state.
Name's Philip. I just gotta let you know this call is being recorded for training quality purposes. I had a quick question about surplus hatchery salmon. Do you have and steelhead? Do you have a quick moment?
Yeah, certainly.
I want to preface that both parties, the Department of Fish and Wildlife and myself, recorded this call. This was her response of if what I see in this photo is actually true.
Oftentimes, if it's a very small number, there may be some on-site burial of surplus carcasses.
So you were saying that it's not a common practice, but if it's maybe a small number, they might do that, or it is something that has happened in the past. I know that, what were you meaning by that?
So what I'm saying is that there may be instances where we have just a handful of fish that it's not, it doesn't make sense to call a contractor to come pick those up. Those may either be buried at the facility, at the hatchery facility, or taken to a landfill.
When you say small numbers, I know that there's millions of salmon that come back with all the hatcheries. What's a small number in relation to like one hatchery or a couple hatcheries? Just for
I
reference.
couldn't tell you offhand. I mean, I don't have that number offhand. I could certainly direct you to our hatchery data if you're curious about all of the disposition of our salmon and steelhead.
But you are saying that if the number doesn't make sense to give to the contractor, have them come in, there would be a situation where it would go or has gone to a landfill or you guys have buried them on site. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct, and that's
Because there's a picture that was sent to me that has, you know, a trench in it, an open trench that's at a hatchery that has more than that number in there. So I just didn't know if your definition of a small amount and my definition of a small amount maybe is different.
I then asked her if she's aware of the $20 million contract that spells out exactly how these fish are supposed to be handled.
I've read that contract, covered it from the beginning to the end. Have you read that contract from the beginning to the end?
yeah. I actually write that contract
Okay.
and our RFQ bid, so I'm pretty familiar with it.
There's nothing inside of that contract that says that, there will be salmon that they might not get, that they might not take or have to come get or bid, that
Oh,
you guys would, dispose of them yourself or not require them to dispose of them and you actually bury them on site at the hatchery ground. So I'm just curious
yeah,
why
yeah,
that is.
sure. No, the contract is only responsible for the actions that the contractor has to take. So, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, we have agency to make decisions as to how those surplus are utilized.
So wait, the Department of Fish and Wildlife gets to determine if the fish gets buried or actually gets sold or donated, even though the state law specifically details what is supposed to be done with these fish so that the maximum amount of revenue can go back into salmon habitat restoration?
Pretty much every other state in the U.S. now has to actually pay to get their fish disposed of. So this
You
is,
do you know
oh,
do you
sorry.
know that's true for a fact?
I know for, I believe, Oregon now, California,
And
Michigan. It's been a while since we've done this
but
analysis, but my understanding is that, yeah,
so you know for a fact that every other state in the United States has to.
no,
uh,
I can't
okay.
speak to every other, but I can speak to, yeah, a lot of the states do have to pay for disposal of their carcasses.
These are not the Department of Fish and Wildlife's fish. They're our fish. Any of these were viable options for those fish. Recreational anglers should have had the opportunity to catch these fish, either downstream in a bubble fishery or all the water leading up to this river. Commercial fishermen should have had an opportunity to harvest them. If there was still surplus after that, These fish should have been sold to a private fish buyer. If no private buyer was available, they should have been offered to the tribes, who historically find markets for surplus fish. If the fish still could not have been sold, they should have been donated to a nonprofit organization. These fish could have fed hundreds of hungry families without requiring agency staff to hand deliver them. If all other options truly failed, anglers should have been allowed to volunteer to place these fish back into river systems as nutrient input, where they would at least have served a purpose. There are 2,100 employees at the Department of Fish and Wildlife. This is an absolute dumpster fire. If you find yourself watching this video or in any kind of management or oversight position within the division, you need to take a hard look in the mirror. It is not okay to sit there and tell yourself it'll never change and there is nothing we can do about it because this is Washington State. We, the stakeholders, are fed up and we aren't going away.